So one of the areas that I'm always looking at the car to try to improve is kind of thermal management. As you can imagine, a car on track, all kinds of parts get very, very hot. The engine, specifically the brakes. I think at COTA we were seeing almost 1,000 degrees Celsius on the rotors. So anything that's around those parts, for example, you really have to pay attention to make sure that that heat isn't going to cause any problems. So fortunately at COTA we didn't have any kind of major issues, but so that I don't have to pay as close attention to it in the future, I wanted to do a couple of things to give me some more margin. So one of the things that I'm going to do before the next event is I made this kind of heat shield. So this is just a Kevlar fabric with a kind of reflective film on it, and basically I'm going to put this in between the rotor and the ball joint because they're really, really close to each other, and the ball joint has a rubber boot on it that has some potential to melt, and there's grease on the inside, so I don't want to overheat the grease either. So kind of paying attention to parts like that will potentially solve a problem before it actually happens. So here we're looking at the lower ball joint, which I've wrapped with the heat shield that I showed you a little bit earlier. I simply use safety wire to go around the base of the ball joint to kind of hold it in place, and then it extends kind of below the control arm a little bit to make sure the whole ball joint is shielded from the rotor. So finally we're looking at the ABS wiring harness. It runs somewhat close to the rotor, not as close as the ball joint, but it's also kind of covered with a rubber protective shielding. So I want to make sure that the heat doesn't melt that rubber, and even worse, melt the wires together, because I don't want to lose ABS on track. So I basically just put a little bit of heat shielding on that, use safety wire just to make sure it stays in place, and should be good to go. So these are just a couple of small examples of how I proactively check the car for issues before they occur. So next I'm going to look over the rest of the car and see if I can come up with something else. Basically just trying to make the car more reliable on track to help guarantee success.